Hi Shantanu.
Hi, Adi. It's been a while.
It's been a while in the sense we haven't personally met for the last 8 months, but we are seeing you on the channel after 8 years.
Yeah, that's why I said it's been a while.
Right. So your video on get your recording basics right is still being watched by a lot of newcomers. It's in fact about to touch 100,000 views,
Wow.
perhaps the highest on for an engineer on our channel, and people still comment on it. So it's a fantastic video that you've
Glad
done.
to know that small things like this do make a difference because you know for industry professionals like yourself or me, who've been around for a long time, it's important that the message goes out that us so-called seniors, uh, are there to spread the word, spread the love, spread the energy, and bring about a collective growth of intelligence, wisdom, and hopefully make us better sound engineers, and more importantly make us better human beings.
No, that's a great thought, and we couldn't capture some basics of your initial days in that conversation.
Yeah.
So if you could share with us your educational background, what made you a sound engineer, and your initial work experiences.
Well, it's I can't really recall the year, but let me just put it briefly. My love for sound has always been there while growing up, because I come from a family which was very, very focused and interested in all the arts, be it music, be it dance, be it painting, be it sculpture, and any kind of the arts is where my family's passion lie. Even though they might not have been artists themselves, but the love and passion for any of the art forms has been tremendous. And without actually trying to drill it in me, with that kind of upbringing, automatically those kind of creative insights get put into your subconscious without you actually knowing it. And then later on you realize, oh my god, this is where I am today is actually because of my family, and from where how I was brought up, and what I heard and what I saw and what I listened to, and whether it be sport or whether it be academics or whether it be music, drama, elocution, any of these things, and all those kind of values, suddenly, when you're later, when you're a little bit more mature to understand, and when you have the next generation with you, you realize, okay, I am what I am because of certain circumstances of my past, of of my upbringing, and how I grew up and where I grew up. So all those kind of things, I come from a middle class family. My father was worked in the private sector. He used to be with Tata Motors. My mother, she's a speech therapist and teacher of the deaf. My elder brother is also ex Tata employee. So we come from a regular Maharashtrian middle class family with high values, high morals, very, very, a great emphasis was paid on reading, on the culture of the land that we lived in, the culture and understanding different cultures, and basically an overall well-rounded education. It was never ever drilled into us that we had to get X percentage of marks to be able to, it was never ever said that, okay, you get above 60, and above 60 in those days was bloody difficult. Today 60 is probably fail. I uh, so it was there was never a carrot that was put in front. Above 60 means you'll do this. He said, like, we need a well-rounded education. I don't want you to be screwing up on your classes. Do your thing, and most importantly, enjoy your life, because when you're going into school, when you're going into college, you're not just going there to study. You're going there to learn how to interact with the rest of society. And the rest of society deals with myriad of different kind of people and cultures, and that's exactly how we are today, and that stands me in good stead today when I'm dealing with, different sorts of people, different kind of clients, different styles of music. And it just helps, because when you have that so strongly ingrained in your psyche, adjusting to any new kind of any kind of change is not really a problem. And uh, my background was really, and I owe a lot to my family. But here's a strange, very very strange fact which not too many people know about, which is, while growing up, Indian film music at that time, the term Bollywood didn't even exist, but Indian film music was looked down upon in my family. You know, yeah, it was looked down upon. It was like, that was the bastardized kind of music. It had nothing to do with classical, but it tried to choose the best of classical. It tried to choose this, but in the end it became a hodgepodge. And which is why, my family, and not just my mom and dad, but the circle of friends that my parents hung around in, their relatives and friends. And thereafter, subconsciously, that goes into your psyche as well, with the kind of friends that you keep. And while growing up, school and college, none of my friends and me were ever into Hindi film music, or any of the regional film music. At the same time, uh, you know people might say that we were snobbish and didn't want, but at the same time, we used to be great fans, and loved going to Indian music concerts, even though sometimes it might have been to make fun of some of the singers, uh, and when they're singing. But in the end, once you go there and you say, your intention is to go there to have fun and to make fun of it, and then suddenly you say, oh my god, it's not just about those crazy expressions that these people make. Like, we used to go for concerts. So my mom and dad took me for concerts, with Bhimsen Joshi singing, and Gangubai Hangal, you know and these are the kind of people who my grandfather actually hung out with. They used to come over and for baitaks, and because my grandfather too was, from the Indian civil services, from the British era. So, but very very strongly rooted in the classics. So they had all these kind of people coming to their homes, and they visited each other, in my family home in Pune, where people used to get together. P.L. Deshpande, for example, the great playwright, uh, and I would call him India's first stand-up comic. Uh, Vijay Tendulkar, all these great, oh yeah, all these great artists, is are the people who we grew up with. And moving on into my college life, hanging around with people like Ranjit, who was, lived just a couple of blocks down the road from me, and being in the presence of his mother, the late great Sitara Devi, and her friends, Abbaji coming over, and all these people coming over, and it was incredible, just, and it all just was so natural. We were never like, oh fuck, wow, just so normal for all of us, to be hanging around with all these great exponents of the arts and crafts. And MF Hussain, for example, all these kind of great Gaitonde, all these people were people who we hung out with. One of the other people was Ehsan's family, his uncle Munna, God bless his soul. Just hanging around with them, they just taught us so much. And we are today obviously self-made, and we worked a lot and worked hard towards where we are today. But without we have to doff our hats to our upbringing. And this is not just my family, but my family and friends and their parents and their relatives, and basically the circle of people who we hung out with. So that's a really long answer for a very short question.
No, but it also tells us a lot that the kind of grounding you've had, which
Yeah.
is like a foundation.
Yeah, and the best part is not, I wasn't ever a musician. I wasn't ever a musician, but it's just that the values of music and the great music that we heard, is was imprinted in my brain, and which is why we became we could be very, very discerning, because we heard good and we heard a lot of crap too. So it was essential to hear the shit too, so as to to be able to differentiate, because, like, what is this? And unfortunately, at that time, the Indian film music sound was just fucking horrible, and it's like it was distorted as hell. And people got, without meaning any disrespect to anyone, having, some of our lady playback singers singing in registers, which is way beyond, the dog scale. And it used to be piercing, and the sound was just not pleasing. Yeah, melodically it was great, but sonically it just didn't do anything, didn't attract me one bit. And here I am today, having done more than 400 to 500 films, or probably more. But I believe I made a difference, because I wanted to bring that kind of sonic value, which I had, which while growing up, and then which I nurtured all these years, and I still continue to do that, which is to bring that kind of excellence to anything that I do. So yeah.
No, that's great, and it really kind of shows in the way, the passion that you emit, and the like I just told you, the grounding that you had is a very strong foundation.
Very, very, very strong, as to basically what's good and bad.
Yeah.
And and a really important message that was sent out to me very, very early on was like, reach for the stars, reach for the stars. Don't set your bar low. Whatever you think is unreachable is a bar too low. So you got to imagine a bar much higher than you can even think of trying to achieve, and which is what I still try to do. And hopefully, and that quest, because I know I will never ever reach that level, but to be constantly in that quest of excellence, and to raising the bar every time you think you might have crossed one rung, is really, really important. And maybe that's what makes me a bit different from anybody else.
No, and I'm sure the viewers and the students of audio engineering will be really charged up, after hearing your
Oh,
passion
this
and
this is it. You
story.
you you have to go on and on till you got your faculties around you, till you're able to be, within the limits of being sane. You need to keep going on, because age actually is just a number. It's how you feel in your head and how you feel in your heart. That's it.
Very true and very nicely said. Thank you. So, Shantanu, what took you to sound engineering? I mean, was there any incident that happened that made you kind of
Yeah, it is. Again, I what I told you earlier was about my family and their friends and bringing. What got me into sound was, again, with the company that I kept. My friends, and a lot, mainly my friends. So here's this bit of a story which should be able to answer certain questions about my academic background and such. I was, in the midst of my postgraduate studies, and it was all growing. I was very much into the academics, but at the same time, my passion was, hanging around with bands, and the just being with them, tweaking guitars and tweaking amps and seeing how everything sounded, but just as a hobby, because they were professional engineers then, who handled stuff. So I used to just hang around, and I loved being around music. And these were all my friends who were the musicians, so it was never a problem. They would always take me in, and we all used to get high together. That's so that was another great aspect of my learning. So I was basically, I think I was in Pune those days, during my postgraduate studies. And I was having some problems with my guide during my thesis program. And you know things were looking a bit depressing on the academic front. And I moved my friends, Ehsan Nurani, Ranjit, Kalyan Pathak, all these guys. They were good friends of mine, and uh, I'll never forget. I think it was Kalyan who actually said, and that time Nakul was another huge, huge, huge influence on my life. And we were all talking one day, and there's another friend of ours whose band I used to be a fan of, Soli Dastur. We used to one of the founding members of probably one of the finest bands that came out of this country, a band called Waterfront, which Soli Dastur, Derek Julian, Roger Dragonet. At first, they had on drums Trilok Gurtu, and then Trilok left and went to Germany, and Trilok position was taken up by Ranjit Barod. And what an incredible lineup! And they didn't play covers, they played their own music. They were all incredibly talented musicians. So Soli, started this particular studio called the Music Room, which was in Bazaar Gate in Fort in Bombay, very close to the Reserve Bank of India. Uh, and Nakul used to be the chief engineer over there. And Kalyan, Ehsan, Nakul, Ranjit, all of them, said, "Listen, man, you're doing all this shit. Carry on with your studies and things like that. That's fine, great. But you're so into music and all this kind of stuff. Why don't you get involved?" So it was that was it. That's Kalyan just told me, like, just do it, man. You got nothing to lose. You always got, if things don't work out, you always got your academics to fall back on. So Nakul spoke to Soli and Pia. That's Pia, Soli's wife, and they got me the job, man. I started off as an assistant at the music room, where for the first 3 months, all I did was answer telephone calls. Those are the days before mobiles. Those are the days also before the internet came into India. It is all manual analog work, and I didn't really get to touch a cable for about a month and a half, maybe more. And it was just learning and absorbing everything. And it was very, very fortunate that, first of all, Nakul was the chief engineer over there, and he headed the studio. Plus, all the musicians who came in were also friends of mine. So it was a hangout, but it was a hangout with a purpose, and that was to learn and never get high on the job. So that was one thing that we also learned at that time. And sure, I started off with a fantastic salary of 1,500 rupees a month. And in that 1,500 rupees a month, you had to pay for your rent, you had to pay for your food, you had to pay for your booze, and whatever drugs you were doing. So you had to try and make it stretch. And we did it, actually, through help of some friends, stayed with some friends' place. So we saved some money on rent. And whatever money we made, went on food and booze. And which is fine. We learned that way. We learned the hard way. And we started on tape, and it's been a process. And if I'm not mistaken, that was in the year 1990, maybe. And today, 2020, here I am, talking to you as one of the senior engineers. So that's my I haven't looked back. Even though I'm still in touch with a lot of my colleagues from my academic years. So still very much into the sciences, and I'm still intrigued by the work that they do. And especially a lot of my colleagues and my classmates are very, very actively involved in the scientific process as scientists and doctors, involved in the hopeful vaccine for COVID-19, and the same kind of people who are involved with the older epidemics, such as like HIV and Ebola and stuff like that. So I'm very much tuned into the progress that is going on in the sciences, and therefore, the Nobel Prize. And who it goes to is one of the big passions and one of the big hobbies of my life, which is like, that's my tribute to the sciences and my background.
Oh, excellent. I think many people wouldn't even be knowing this part of your life. And
No, no, it's not something
thank you for
that,
sharing.
yeah, it's not something that I speak about.
Yeah,
And
no, but thank you for sharing this journey so far.
it's not something that I'm embarrassed about, or that's why I don't speak about. It's just something that I don't speak about. But if I'm asked, I will, I will never hedge the answer. I will be as forthcoming as I am with everything else.
So, Shantanu, at Music Room, how many years did you spend? What was your career-wise your journey from there?
That time, it was all so much fun, and it still is. Every day was fun for me. While I was assisting Nakul, and then Nakul went on to his own. Went independent, and then I took over Music Room, and it was the days filled with laughter, and having fun. At that point of time, it's predominantly doing advertising jingles, and we probably did about on an average of uh, two jingles a day, uh, you know for God knows, I think about 4 or 5 years probably. And so it's thousands of jingles. Did some epic albums during that period of time. Did a great album, the second album for at that time they were called Rock Machine, and the album was called Second Coming, which actually was the first time that their hit single Pretty Child was featured on. And yes, so I engineered that album, and the same mix actually went on to their next album, but this time they were in the avatar of Indus Creed. I did albums for Shweta Shetty, Sunita Rao, um, Jasmine Barucha, Asha Putli, a lot of stuff. Did some documentaries. I think film that I did, my first Hindi film that I did was with Ranjit Bharat as a music director, and I think the film was for Ketan Mehta, and it was called "Oh Darling, Ye Hai India." And that is my first exposure to what I called long format, because after doing many years of tracks that lasted 30 seconds, it was a huge relief to do albums which had 4-minute songs, and do a film at that point of time, which was approximately 4 minutes per song again. So it was great. So that's when the long format of Indian commercial music started got me thinking. And it was a fight in my head. It's like, yeah, the only kind of commercial long format audio work that I can be involved in this country on a commercial level, which would help me work my finances to, uh, happens to be Bollywood and Indian film music, and the form of music which was banned from my house while I was growing up, and which was looked down upon. And here it turns out that
Your bread
that's
and butter.
that's that's probably going to be my bread and butter at some point in time.
Yeah.
And there's a very important thing that I learned from the great jazz maestro um, a few years ago, maybe in the year 2008, Herbie Hancock. And I asked him a question. It's like, Herbie, uh, you know, you being a maestro, you come from an era of Miles Davis and all these cats. You performed with people like that. You must be hearing lots of music and artists who send you demos, or you've visited in school campuses. There must be something that you must be saying, oh God, this is horrible. And in his inimitable humble way, um, he told me, in this very, very slow accent, he told me, Shantanu, uh, what I have learned and I've come to learn is like, the things that are bad don't really register to me. So I only go back with what I hear, what is good. So in effect, what he was trying to say is, even if it might have been a bad performance on the whole, the few good things that happened, because it couldn't be a bad performance all the way from beginning to the end. There must have been something good, even if it was for a fleeting moment. Those fleeting moments of good and bright sparks are the only things that registered to him.
Very nice.
That's and that has stuck with me. And I've tried to imbibe, that thought and that philosophy, and I'm probably not successful, but it's work in progress. So my starting off was, going back. I keep digressing.
That is
Uh,
completely fine. No
yeah,
problem.
is like, so my music room days were like amazing. The kind of work that we did, the kind of camaraderie that was there. It was one full musical community, and there was no divide as such. Even the film musicians who used to come over to the studio, it was great fun hanging out. And working with people like that, was just absolutely awesome. And that, the camaraderie and the vibe of just being with music, and then being able to put your stamp on a particular sound which you have loathed and which you don't like, which you think you can improve, and to see an expression change in the people who are listening to a sound which is so new to them, and they say like, oh, this is something new, but it works. And which is what got me going, and which is why I still do what I do.
Right. So there was no technical challenge because you didn't have a technical background and you were handling, after you obviously learned with Nakul and then you went on your own.
Yeah, it was I wouldn't say it's, but in the end, it's just mechanics. In the end, it's just mechanics. And I've always had a scientific bent of mind. So, at those days, again, like I said, there was no internet, so you ask the questions. So if you don't know something, you don't bullshit your way through. You ask the questions, and maybe you'll get an answer, maybe you won't. And if you don't get an answer, well, you ask someone else. And this is how we learned. And this is where my good friend and classmate, Mujib Dadarkar, who in my opinion is probably one of the finest brains, this planet has seen, who actually had the patience to actually sit me down and explain so many things, and he still does. A couple of days ago, I called him, hey, Mujib, I'm having a bit of a problem, understanding the process of X particular workflow and certain kind of equipment, and basically the basic integrals of digital flows. He takes the time off to sit down and explain it to me, and once it's explained the way he explains, because he's a great teacher, it becomes so clear to me. And then, which is when I can then teach the other people who might have the same problem. So I have never been afraid to ask, and I've never been afraid to say I don't know. So that has always stood me in good stead, where Shantanu is coming in the way it is. If he doesn't know something, he's not going to bullshit his way through. There have been occasions where I've just had to wing it, but that was not because I didn't know. If I didn't know, I wouldn't have done it. And I have refused jobs because they say, like, listen, I wouldn't know how to do this. You could go to someone else, even though it could have been a lucrative offer. So it was a challenge, but it wasn't ever a challenge which I thought was unsurmountable and couldn't be worked with. And so I learned everything. And here's the strange thing, uh, I read a manual, but I don't give a shit about the manual. You know, I wouldn't mind letting it blow up on me, because you give me a piece of equipment, I'll make it work for what I want to do. And I'll that's just the way I work. It's like I don't work within parameters. My mind doesn't have certain boundaries, and if I can push the equipment to its edge and say like, hey, Shantanu, that's not possible, I say like, well, you know I'll just try and do it. And if I'll give up if I really feel it's not possible, and very rarely have I had to give up. That's it. So technology is a challenge, but it's a challenge that you really want. And it's not really a challenge as such, because in the end, it's mechanics. It's actually, it's your head. To What I find is a challenge, which I challenge myself, is to be able to actually oralize what I visualize, because I don't just listen to music. I see music. I see music in shades of colors and hues. It's like a palette for me. So blue and yellow, you mix blue and yellow, you'll get green, but you'll get different kinds of green depending on the yellow and blues that you use. So it's all very, very, and it's so dependent on your mood and your mind. And your mind sets a palette, mind sets a tone. And these are like, people hear voices in their head, uh, in a good way. I hear music in my head, and I see it in terms of colors. And to me, all music is a painting, and it's just a painting that it happens to be auditory. That's it. So that's my philosophy.
Nice and very nicely put. Thank you. So, so music room, post music room, did you move to some other studio, and what then?
Yeah, post music room is when I went independent. So I didn't want myself to be attached to any particular studio, because I dare say it became a bit boring. And also during that time period, while I was at music room, and after I completed doing the Rock Machine Second Coming album, is when the band offered me the job as a front of house engineer. And that's when I started exploring, and I dare say one of the founding, uh, you know, FOH engineers who came in from the studio. Otherwise, one of the few, I think probably one of the first few freelance FOH engineers and monitor engineers at that time. And I'm talking, I think this was the year 91 or 92, if I'm not mistaken. Because at that time, when bands went out on the road, it was usually the sound company, uh, or the rental company, PA company, whose engineer over there, the person who set up, did sound for the band. So not only did he set up the gear and the stage with all his people, he also mixed the band. And a lot of times, those guys weren't really equipped to handle music. They were great as techs to set up the stage and the PA and stuff like that. But they were good production engineers, but they weren't really good FOH and music engineers to be able to catch out the nuances of live sound, depending on the genre. Like you don't want a kick drum in your face in a beautiful bebop band, for example. So, but and those are the big mistakes that a lot of those engineers made. And I came onto the scene, and I dare say fixed that problem, and started a trend of other uh, studio engineers with that sensibility coming in and getting into FOH and monitors. So I did that too. So I used to travel the world, at the festivals, doing the music festivals in Europe during the summers. And working with bands like Rock Machine, and Colonial Cousins, and uh, you know Pentagram. I had a great time working with all these. Basically, I'm a rocker, so obviously I prefer to do all the rock bands. So I did a lot of this stuff, and it went on for a while. I did a couple of the jazz yatras over here, and as a sound engineer, I used to do the Mood Eye Festival on all I think 3 days, and ending off in the Live Wire night is where all the band competition used to take place. So I used to do all of that. I did that continuously, I think, for about 3 years, if I'm not mistaken. Uh, so that was an exciting time of my life, where I didn't want to be tied down to any particular studio. And then, obviously, because people knew me around, I could be able to pick and choose my work. And so I went independent for many, many years. And after some time, that started getting to me as well, where it started becoming, how would I say, it became started becoming a rat race. Okay. And people wanting to undercut you, and play dirty and try and get your gig, or try and sneak a gig away from you, be it a studio gig or anything. So I got very, very tired. And not very tired, I said I couldn't play that game. Okay. And because I'm not bent that way. So like, listen, I want to work. I want to do good work. I want to work with bands. I want to work with people who are interested. And there was a sea change at that point taking place, where a lot of the people from advertising were migrating into film, and just so that they had a larger canvas to paint on. And I started feeling the same way. And uh, you know I came across some openings, and I joined Empire Studios, as a full time engineer, and I did some epic work over there for a lot of the very very popular films. Uh, Namely, it all started off with Kuch Kuch Hota Hai. And then earlier on, as a freelancer, I did Mission Kashmir and a fair amount of other films, Ashoka, and stuff like that, if I remember correctly. And then I did Bunty or Bubbly, which actually gave, I think, Shankar Ehsaan Loy one of their biggest hits, if not the biggest hit, Kajra. So it was a big hit for them. I didn't do Dil Chahta Hai, even though most people think I did. That was done and brilliantly engineered by my good friend, who actually happened to be started off his career with assisting me, Vijay Benegal, popularly known as Benny. So he did Dil Chahta Hai, and so that was his big film, and it's probably one of the finest sounding. Film soundtracks that you can find today from the Indian film industry, and that set a benchmark. Unfortunately, things went south, and I have no idea why. Sorry, that's my cat over there. But, yeah, just going
What's the
on.
name?
She's called Zuki.
Okay.
Zuki. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's it. So yeah, so then I joined Empire, and after Empire, my work was appreciated by Adi, as in Adi Chopra from Yash Films, when I was doing Bunty or Bubbly. And I think going by that work, and plus I did a lot of the score for Yashji's film Veer Zara. So I had all the experience of recording, large string sections, because Empire, if you remember, in those days used to have a huge live area. Yeah, so where is to bring in string sections to do it. And here's an interesting point. At that point of time, everyone, all the senior engineers, are senior to me. Uh, when they used to record string sections, used to record in a very very strange way, where they never used to place the string section in a way that an orchestra usually sits. It was just one row behind the other. Violins up front. After the violins comes the violas, after the violas come the cellos, and after the cellos come the basses, which all seemed a very, very flat and two-dimensional to me, and I thought it was really horrible. And after doing the first year, I'll never forget this. I think I forget the name of the film. It was for Yash Raj Films. The director was Kunal Kohli. There goes my cat again. And I forget the name of the film. I know for a fact that it had Hrithik Roshan in, and I also know that the film fared very very badly. Uh, but the music, the background score was done by the great arranger Babluda, who used to be an arranger for R.D. Burman and Pancham Das. So you know, I said, Babluda, you probably won't like it, but this is the way I'd like to set up the orchestra. Uh, you know, from now on, can we just ignore what happened yesterday? Because they were thankfully just the yesterday that I talk about just had about two or three pieces which had strings in it. So uh, he said, "Go ahead, do what you want to do. We'll see how it is. If it doesn't work, then we'll go back to the old-fashioned way." And I went in over there. I think it was a 40 or 44 piece or 48 piece string section, which is violins and viola and cello and contrabass was involved. And then I set it up in as a proper orchestral fashion. First violins, second violins, viola, uh, cello, bass, and I spread it out. And divided into first violin section, second violins, blah blah blah. And when the scores came in, the orchestra came in, I pointed out to them, it's like, okay, you will sit over here, you will sit over here, you will sit, blah blah blah. So I actually told the orchestra where to sit, and they were all, very very tolerant. They're saying like, who the fuck is this guy? At that time, yeah, it was kind of longish hair, this rock and kind of guy. I wasn't gray, and so I didn't really command any respect because of the grayness. It was I was just this upstart kid, who smoked 35 not packets, 30 cigarettes a day, and stuff like that, and you know, spoke in a different language, so to say. Even though I spoke English, I speak in a different language, and I told them where to sit, and I set up microphones in a particular way, and I told Babluda, the conductor, I said, "This is where you will stand." I had something called as a Deca tree. They were all wondering what all these fucking mics doing everywhere, and I said, "Okay, now you have all your scores, and Babluda will count you in, and play. Forget where you're sitting. Okay, play your part, and let me deal with the rest." And the first piece that they played, and they got freaked out. They actually stopped playing, where they all said, "Oh my God, we can actually hear each other. I can actually," the first violin says, "I know exactly what the cello is doing." The cello is saying, "I know actually what the viola is doing." They could all actually hear each other without headphones. And so, because when there is a reason why you have orchestral placements, it's not just because of style or the way the it's the way the songwriter, the music composer, visualizes that particular piece of music as to, this is where the melody will come in, this is what will be the harmony, this will be a counterpoint which will come in from this side, and there are all these different frequency ranges bouncing across the stereo spectrum. And it's not just stereo, it's the depth of field as well, which is what gave that kind of music, orchestral music with strings and horns and brass and cello and the choir and stuff like that, which gave it depth, which gave it the expanse, which it made it feel like an ocean of sound. And that is what was lacking, I felt. And I think I changed that. I changed that for the Indian film industry, where I was the first person probably to get an orchestral placement done in its own actual version of Western classical orchestral placement. And I don't think I've looked back ever since then. And the orchestras and the arrangers have started respecting me for that. It's like, okay, maybe this guy has something. And I did the same thing, with dholak and tabla and things like that, recording ensembles. And all this comes, I go back to when I was growing up, because hearing all this music. So when I was growing up, I used to have all this. I used to have Mozart and Chopin and Rimsky-Korsakov and Tchaikovsky and all these guys, great composers, playing on stereos, hearing all that music. My mom and dad and my brother taking me to concerts with being conducted by George Solti or Herbert von Karajan with the in Berlin. We were all gone there to hear with the Berlin Philharmonic Orchestra, and so all these great composers, hearing grand orchestral music that way. I'm saying, fuck, if I can do that with the Indian film industry, man, this is going to be the shit. But here I am today. I'm actually jobless today, 2020, which has no reflection on the kind of work that I did. But that's the kind of work, yeah, that's the kind of work that I did, and I continue to do. And hopefully, people use me as an example to be able to, break barriers. You don't have to follow. Everyone is saying this is the way to do it. Well, do it that way, but break a rule. Break a rule to see if it works, and if it works, it becomes the norm. And so that's what I mean by accept the challenges. And as I treat technology the same way, technology is there, it's meant to be broken. Yeah, you have to break the rules of everything, and the moment you start doing that, you get better technology, you get better at doing what you do. And it's never ending, and it's a constant learning process, which should take up all your time, and just make you better at what you do. And all this process, and there's a thought process that going behind all of this just makes you into a better human being and an easier person to hang out with.
I think what you've achieved is a lot, and like you rightly said, you brought in new ways of recording.
Yeah. But they
So,
actually weren't new ways. It just changed the way that it was done over here in India.
right,
And
maybe I would say better ways of,
yeah,
and
and
the
I
correct
just
way.
exactly, and it broke the barrier because everyone thought that I was just a Western guy, and I don't understand the Western sound. I said, listen, man, sound is sound. Good sound is good sound. Whether it's Western, whether it's Indian, whether it's African, it really doesn't fucking matter. You record a vocal well. It really doesn't matter whether it's Bhimsen Joshi singing, whether it's Pavarotti singing, whether it's Udit Narayan singing. It really doesn't matter. So you just record it well. You use the correct microphones for that. You use the correct preamplifiers for that. You use the right amount of compression. You just use the right amount of reverb. You do all those kind of things. You just do it well. Now, doing it well, if it happens to be a Western way, well, I'm Western.
That's fine,
Yeah.
as long as the job is done well.
Yeah, the job is done well. I don't care what you call it.
Right. So, Shantanu, post Empire, what was your move? And
Well, post Empire, Adi Chopra saw something in me and he asked me to come and join YRF. And I was there for 15 years. The rest is history.
it is, and you
Yeah.
maybe created a lot of histories at YRF. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, at YRF, what was it that you kind of did new again?
Well, I decided then that, that's when I was able to actually start exploring multi-format recording. Instead of just panning the sounds into different channels for surround. At that time, the surround that was available was just 5.1. So instead of just panning things, I started actually recording in 5.1, which is again not a new thing, but it's something that I started doing because now I had the facilities to enable me to do such things. So I used to do 5.1 recordings, and my most important contribution, I would say, was to uh, bring a top grade studio into access normally people who would not enter those kind of studios. I made them welcome. It was, I didn't just put it out that this is for the elite, this is only for Bollywood. I started telling, and I was always part of the independent industry, going by my background in rock and roll. And this is what I started bringing bands in, and I started telling them, like, listen, you know you want to sound like the West, right? You want to sound like ABCD from there, right? You can. You just need to do it right, and this is the way to do it right. And uh, they came in over there, and a classic example of that was the work that I did with two bands, and one of them was Advaita and the other is Soulmate. And strangely enough, those two albums was well, they were highly acclaimed albums, not just in India but in to different parts of the world, for the people who heard it. And I still use those albums as my sound check albums. As reference when I'm doing different kinds of music in different studios. So you could say, and it was constant. I had I had people who backed me. I had people who believed in me, and it was a constant upgrade for the facility. I started bringing in different kinds of sound for different things. I started developing a sound for people. And determining as to being more precise, because you're coming into a world class facility. You got to be on the top of your game. Not just being able to afford it, but being at the top of your game, like make use. There's no point you coming over there and not being able to play your ass off. So being able to give you those facilities, being able to give you that sound which you've always had in your head, and the joy that I used to see on musicians' faces after they finished their take was just, I'll never forget that, and I still don't forget it. Whenever I see a musician come back and say like, "Fuck, that's me," I say, "Yeah, man, that's you." It's like I just captured what you were doing, and that's what keeps bringing them back. And I wouldn't say I did anything different, but I opened up a grade A facility to people who would normally not come and use that, who still have this kind of angst within. Hey, man, Bollywood is shit. So, I don't even want to touch it. But I used to tell them, like, yeah, well, maybe Bollywood is shit, but I'm there, right? And I'm not shit. So do you trust me? Yeah, man, we fucking trust you. So let's do it. So they came in and did it, and haven't looked back since. And uh, that's probably my legacy. So bringing in, uh, and the more and more I started doing, the more and more bands started coming in and working with me. And I finally got back into the space of, like, listen, I'm doing more indie stuff and doing more music that I like than Bollywood. And because I found that the Bollywood sound was deteriorating, because now everyone became a music composer, everyone became an arranger, because they had this great instrument in front of them, which was their laptop. And they had great tutors, which was YouTube and Google. So everyone became a producer, everyone became an arranger, everyone knew how to do everything. So they all started working from home. And well, working from home and not having to use an expensive studio and an engineer brings costs down. And that's when uh, you know the slide began. And right now, according to me, Bollywood has reached a stage of no return. It's probably the worst that Bollywood has ever sounded has been in the last 2 or 3 years. And I dare say that I see it deteriorating. But I was so glad that when I saw this deterioration taking place, my independent music and my those independent clients started growing. And they started getting empowered. And those are the people now who Bollywood wanted. So you'll see a lot of the singers and musicians today who are playing are all from the independent industry, but are using Bollywood just to be able to nurture their own dreams, and which is what I was doing, and trying to help them get that way.
So again, maybe I would say a little ahead of time, and
Well, I don't know. I just did what I felt was right.
right.
Yeah.
So I can at least vouch for this fact that the kind of equipment that even you've kind of bought from us
Yep.
for the studio
Yep.
has been always well researched and well thought out,
Yeah.
because you had to fight with the management sometimes to
Yeah.
even kind of meet your demands, because your demands was to increase the quality of your recording
Yes.
based on the kind of work that you were doing there.
Yes.
So what we will do is, in the next part we will answer a Q&A thing. We have a lot of viewers who sent in very good questions.
All right.
So maybe in the next part we'll come there and continue this discussion of the situation today that a music composer or producer has become an engineer also.
That's right. Yeah,
So
they have.
your views will kind of really
Yeah.
help youngsters take the right path.
Absolutely. Will
So
do.
I'll just pause this video and we'll do the next part.
Sure.